In this video, we're going to talk about how to receive the promises of God. So if there is something that you are believing God for in your life, you're not going to want to miss this video. Before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to this channel and click on the bell if you want to be notified when new videos come out. All right, how do we receive God's promises? Hebrews chapter 6 verse 12 says this: "We do not want you to become lazy, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised." It takes faith and patience to inherit the promises of God, because not all prayers are answered right away. Not all miracles happen instantly. When you sow into God's kingdom, the reward isn't always immediate, right? When you do the right thing, you don't see the results instantaneously. And so you have to keep hoping, keep praying, keep believing until you see the promises of God come to pass, because God has a destination for each and every person where his promises are fulfilled in our lives, but God takes his time getting there, right? God is faithful. He always gets us there, but God sure does take his time getting there. And sometimes I'm like, God, do you have to take the long route? Like, God, don't you know a shortcut? Like God, can we at least do the speed limit to get there? And when it comes to the promises of God, I find myself, saying the same thing that my kids say every time we get into the car, and that is, are we there yet? Right? Like, God, you said weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Well, it's been night for a long time. So where is the joy at? Are we there yet? God, you said you would do exceedingly abundantly above all that I could ask, think, or imagine. Are we there yet? God, you said no weapon formed against me would prosper. Are we there yet? God, you said that if I train up a child in the way that they should go when they are old, they will not depart. Well, Jesus, mine departed, so are we there yet? And sometimes we wonder if we are ever going to get there, if we are ever going to see the promises of God fulfilled in our lives. Because yes, God is faithful, but man, does he take his time getting us to that place where his promises are fulfilled in our lives, which is why you need faith and patience, right? You need more than just strong faith. You need long faith. See, strong faith is how big you can believe God for, but long faith is how long you can believe. And can you keep on believing when it seems like it's not working? And that's why Scripture tells us to not grow weary in well-doing. Galatians 6:9 says, "And let us not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart." For most people, there are 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. But for the believer, there are 5 seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall, and due season. Everybody else lives with 4 seasons, but for the believer, you live with 5 seasons. And that 5th season is due season. And that is the season where you reap the reward of your labor, where you see God come through, you see the harvest, you see the fulfillment of God's promises in your life. But you only get to due season if you don't lose heart, if you don't give up. And so Hebrews 6 tells us to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what God had promised. And in Hebrews 6 specifically mentions the example of Abraham and Sarah. Verse 13 says this: "When God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself, saying, 'I will surely bless you and give you many descendants.' So after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised." Abraham and Sarah were unable to have children, and God appeared to them and said, "You're going to have a son." And so they waited and waited and waited year after year after year, and still no child. And so Sarah thought, maybe we need to help God out a little bit. He's not working according to our timetable, so let's help God out. And so she went to Abraham and said, "Hey, I got an idea. How about you sleep with my slave Hagar, and maybe you can have a child through her?" And Abraham was like, "Is this some kind of test?" You set me up here. But he was like, oh, I guess you for real about this. Okay. And so he agrees to it, doesn't put up much of a fight. He just goes along with it. And sure enough, Hagar gets pregnant and gives birth to a son named Ishmael. But God said, that is not the son that I promised I would give you. That is the blessing you made, not the one that I gave. And so the child is an analogy of the fruit of impatience. It's an example of how we can produce things in our own impatience that we call a blessing, but God calls it settling. And so by this time, Abraham is in his late 90s, Sarah is in her late 80s, and God comes to them and says, by this time next year, you're going to be holding a son in your arms. And Sarah laughed, right? Because she was way beyond childbearing years. I mean, she thought that she had missed her opportunity. She thought it was too late for God to fulfill his promise in her life. And God says, look, whenever I say it's time, because God is not subject to time. Time is subject to God, which means it's not too late unless God says it's too late. And some of you may feel like you are outside of your season to produce, that you miss your opportunity, that it's too late to fulfill the promises of God and to see God come through in your life. But it's not too late unless God says it's too late. And he hasn't said it's too late if you still have breath in your lungs. And so sure enough, God's word came to pass for Abraham and Sarah. A year later, they are holding that baby boy in their arms. And God said, I want you to name him Isaac. And Isaac means God has made me laugh, because when God told them that they would have a son at that age, they just laughed because it was so unbelievable. And that is the example that Hebrews chapter 6 gives us when it comes to the example of faith. And so they are an example of what it looks like to patiently wait in faith for the promise of God. And they're also an example of what not to do while you're waiting on God to fulfill his promise in your life. And so we can also learn from their mistakes. And so I want to tell you 3 things that you can do in the waiting season, right? Number 1, don't worry while you wait. You know, worry is a meditation on a negative narrative, right? It's when in your mind you begin to think, what if this happens? What if that happens? And you run through all these possible scenarios in your mind of things that could go wrong, right? Whenever we start to worry, we tend to imagine the worst case scenario, even though the vast majority of our what ifs never happen. In fact, researchers at the University of Cincinnati found that 85% of the things that we worry about never happen. 85% of the things that we stress over, that we lose sleep over, never even happen. Or as Joyce Meyer says, worry is putting a down payment on a problem you may never have. Not to mention, worry is worthless. I love Jesus said this in Matthew 6:27. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? See, Jesus shows us the futility of worry. Like if worry could benefit our lives at all, then we should worry. But it's futile. It's useless. It doesn't accomplish anything. Now, I know that there are some people that think that by worrying, they are demonstrating love and concern. I think every family's got that one person who feels like it's their responsibility to worry about everybody in the family. And when you try to talk to them about it, like, why are you so worried? They're like, well, somebody's got to worry. And it's like, no, nobody has to worry, right? Because it does not make the situation better. It only makes you worse, right? So don't worry while you wait, because it's worthless and it doesn't make the situation better. It just makes you worse. Number 2, realize God is working while you wait. Ephesians 3:9 says that my task is to bring out in the open and make plain what God, who created all this in the first place, has been doing in secret behind the scenes all along. You need to realize that while you are waiting, God is working behind the scenes. That even if in the natural it doesn't look like anything is happening, God is working behind the scenes. Heard a story about this couple that had been trying to sell their home. It was a nice house in a good neighborhood. It was priced to sell. Every realtor that checked out the house said it was probably going to be a very quick sale. But 9 months later, they had 110 people come and look at their house, and not a single person came back for a second visit. And so, this couple is just like, man, what is going on? They're praying that their house would sell, and nothing is happening. And so at the same time, they are trying to sell their house. The church where they attended just got a new pastor from New Zealand, and they had been, house hunting and trying to find a house, and they hadn't been able to find one yet. And so, he goes and lets his pastor know, says, hey, my house is for sale if you guys want to come and check it out. And so the new pastor and his family agreed to come and check out the house. And so when they pulled up to the house, they just sat in their car. The pastor and his family sat in the car for 30 minutes. And so this guy is thinking, like, man, maybe, he just doesn't want to see the house, man. I mean, he doesn't even want to go inside and check it out. And so they're wondering what's going on and why they're just sitting in their car for 30 minutes. And so finally, after 30 minutes, they decide to get out of the car, and they come into the house, and they take a quick look around, and they said, we'll take it. They offered full asking price for the house. And the pastor said that before they came to America, before they moved here, that God spoke to his wife in a dream and showed her the house that they would live in when they came to America. And she said that when she pulled up into the driveway, that is the moment that they realized this was the exact same house that God showed them in the dream. And so they took so long coming in because they were absolutely blown away that this was the exact house that God showed her that they would live in when they came to America. And his wife said that when I woke up from the dream, I asked God to send angels to surround the house and save it for us. See, this couple couldn't understand why their house would not sell, but God was already working behind the scenes. And so don't get discouraged when you don't see things happen in the natural. Understand that God is working behind the scenes. This is why faith takes patience, because you can't always see what God is doing behind the scenes. You can't see the puzzle pieces that he is moving around, the events that he is orchestrating in your favor. And so you just have to trust that God is working even when you can't see it. And number 3, prepare for the promise while you wait. Don't waste the waiting period. See it as an opportunity to prepare for God's promise, right? Like if you're waiting for a relationship, you want to get married, then spend this time growing and developing yourself so that when God does send a relationship into your life, you are at a healthy place mentally, spiritually, and emotionally so that you can hold on to it. If you are waiting for your business to take off, then start reading leadership and management books so that you can actually lead that business when it goes to the next level. If you are waiting on the new job, update your resume now. Use the waiting period to prepare for the promise. One of my mentors and his wife were unable to have children, just like Abraham and Sarah, and they had prayed and prayed and prayed for years to be able to have a child. They had, promises from God, prophetic word after prophetic word that they were holding on to, and year after year, nothing happened. And so finally, in frustration, he just said, God, when are we going to have a baby? And God spoke to him and said, when are you going to get the room ready? If you're going to have a baby, you need to have a nursery. So when are you going to get the room ready? And he realized that he had been praying for the promises of God, but he had not actually prepared for it. And so they went to the store, they bought a crib, they decorated the room, and it wasn't long after that they were holding a baby boy in their arm. And right now they have 2 kids. Because if you actually believe that God's promise is going to come to pass, then you need to prepare for it. And preparing for the promise is an act of faith. And when faith and patience come together, you can lay hold and receive everything that God has for you. So if there is a specific promise that you are believing God for in your life, drop it in the comments below. I would love to pray with you and for you and believe God for that promise to come to pass in your life. And so if you found this video helpful at all, do me a favor and smash that like button and share it with one of your friends. Until next time, thank you.